Antoine Fuqua made Training Day, so he knows a masterpiece when he sees one. His top 10 includes the movie critics tried to cancel for glorifying torture, a film that nearly derailed Spielberg's reputation, and an Oscar-winning epic even its screenwriter refused to watch. These are Fuqua's favorite films of the 21st century. Denzel Washington's first two directing gigs, Antwone Fisher and The Great Debaters, were decent, nothing special. Fences changed that. He directed it, produced it, starred in it, best film he'd made, and his best acting in years. Before that, 7 of his last 8 movies were about chasing bad guys and making money. Then he reminded everyone he could still deliver real drama. 2 Oscar nominations proved it, and Fuqua agreed, naming it first on his list of the 21st century's best films and calling it a feast of masterful acting. Denzel Washington did an incredible job of not only directing, but also having the laser-like focus and discipline to stay true and elevate to the big screen one of our most talented and celebrated playwrights. I believe August Wilson would be proud. The story follows a working-class black father in the 1950s trying to raise his family while dealing with everything he's been through in his life. The script is credited solely to August Wilson. But what a lot of people don't know is that Denzel and Spike Lee both did uncredited treatments during pre-production, and Denzel kept tweaking it on set. He refused to take credit for any of it because he wanted Wilson to get full recognition. Wilson passed away in 2005, but in 2017, he was posthumously nominated for an Oscar for the screenplay. This was the biggest success of Danny Boyle's career. Slumdog Millionaire tells the story of a kid from the slums of Mumbai. This kid ends up on the Indian version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and somehow knows all the answers. And on paper, it sounded completely ridiculous. Even Boyle didn't want it at first. He said his agent told him what it was about, and he thought, why would anyone want to make a movie about that? But then he saw Simon Beaufoy's name on the script, the guy who wrote The Full Monty, and decided to give it a read. He said by page 20, he was in. That's how good the writing was. The movie exploded, $15 million budget, and it made $383 million. Won 8 Oscars, including Best Director for Boyle, and a whole shelf of other awards. Golden Globe, BAFTA, Directors Guild Award, the whole package. Fuqua called it a film that took him into a world he'd never seen before. It was not only moving, but it was heartfelt, dangerous, and entertaining. In 2012, a complete unknown named Ben Zeitlin came out of nowhere with Beasts of the Southern Wild and somehow managed to make one of the most striking films of the decade. The movie exploded at Cannes, won the Camera d'Or, and pulled in 4 Oscar nominations. And most people remember it for one reason: Quvenzhané Wallis. At 9 years old, she became the youngest Best Actress nominee in Academy history. This was an indie made for under $2 million, and it ended up grossing over $23 million. One of those rare moments where everything lined up: critical praise, festival wins, breakout performance, real audience love. And then Zeitlin vanished. He disappeared for nearly a decade before resurfacing with Wendy in 2020, a kind of loose Peter Pan thing that came and went without a ripple. Antoine Fuqua called Beasts of the Southern Wild imaginative and deeply moving, with none of the usual Hollywood tricks. Said it showed a world most people don't even realize exists, right in our own backyard. Kathryn Bigelow's Zero Dark 30 was always going to be a lightning rod. It's about the decade-long manhunt for Osama bin Laden, told mostly through the eyes of a CIA analyst played by Jessica Chastain. But it wasn't the Oscars that made headlines. It was the controversy. A lot of people were furious with how the film handled torture. Not just that it was in there, but that it didn't seem to condemn it. There were open letters, protests, opinion pieces. Naomi Wolf wrote in The Guardian that Bigelow was no better than Leni Riefenstahl, Nazi Germany's propaganda director. Bigelow pushed back, saying she wasn't promoting torture, just documenting what happened. And Mark Boal, the screenwriter, made it clear that this story was built from first-hand accounts and his own experience as a journalist in Iraq. The film has been mischaracterized. Those scenes don't show torture as producing valuable information. If anyone has seen the film and comes to that conclusion, I think that's a political misreading of the film, completely. The original version of the movie was actually about the failed search for bin Laden. Then, when he was killed in 2011, they had to throw it all out and start from scratch. Bowles said the movie became a political football before he'd even written a word. Accusations flew from both sides of the aisle. But if you actually watch the thing, it doesn't glorify torture, it just refuses to look away from it. Fuqua praised it for its sustained tension and intensity, even in the quietest scenes. He said Bigelow handled it masterfully, and Bowles' script was smart, tight, and moving. Some people love to say Avatar left no cultural footprint, that for all its box office records, it didn't really stick. Fuqua doesn't care about any of that. For him, it was about the experience. Avatar transported me to other places and filled me with wonderment. A reminder to us all to continue pushing our vision. James Cameron first wrote an 80-page treatment for Avatar back in 1994. He sat on it for over a decade, waiting for the tech to catch up with what he wanted to do. And when it finally did, Avatar dropped like a bomb. It held the title of highest-grossing movie in history for nearly 10 years, until Avengers Endgame finally bumped it in 2019. But adjusted for inflation, it's still number 2, right behind Gone with the Wind. And it had already dethroned Titanic, which, surprise, was also directed by Cameron. The guy's basically his own competition. So this one's a bit of a landmine. Munich from Spielberg, released in 2005. And yeah, it's on Fuqua's list of greatest movies of this century, even though it stirred up plenty of heat upon release. The story's based on a non-fiction book called Vengeance by George Jonas. It follows the Israeli operation to take out the members of Black September after the 1972 Munich Olympics massacre. That book was originally adapted by David and Janet Peoples, same team behind Blade Runner, Unforgiven, and 12 Monkeys. These are serious screenwriters with real weight behind them. But somewhere along the way, the script got taken over. Eric Roth and Tony Kushner came in, rewrote it, and what ended up on screen was very different from what the Peoples had originally done. In a 2024 interview, David Peoples said he and Janet never watched the finished film. They read the later drafts and didn't like what they saw. He said it felt like Spielberg's team had lifted their structure and story, but rewrote it into something they didn't recognize. And they were actually relieved not to be credited. They didn't want to be held responsible for where the script went. Peoples didn't go into specifics about what got changed, but the disappointment was pretty clear. Despite the controversy, Munich was well received. It pulled in 5 Oscar nominations, including one for Best Adapted Screenplay, which is kind of ironic, considering the original writers wanted nothing to do with it. And Fuqua's take is all praise. He called it educational, suspenseful, and said only Spielberg or Hitchcock could have pulled off something that intense and entertaining at the same time. This one's probably the least surprising pick on the list. A lot of people consider it Paul Thomas Anderson's masterpiece. Some even called it the Citizen Kane of its generation, which is a bold statement, but not totally out of line. Daniel Day-Lewis plays Daniel Plainview, a ruthless oil man who will lie, cheat, and ruin anyone to get ahead. It's a brutal look at early American capitalism and the way it still casts a long shadow. The film earned 2 Oscars out of 8 nominations, one of them going to Day-Lewis, obviously. It made $76 million off a $25 million budget and basically turned into a modern classic overnight. Other directors loved this movie too. Christopher Nolan said it was Anderson's best work, plain and simple. Tarantino's brought it up more than once. If ever there is a movie that demands to be seen twice, if not more, before you can really have an intelligent discussion about it, it would be There Will Be Blood. And Fuqua called it a great character-driven piece, lean, focused, and powerful. Now this one is where Fuqua really tips his hat to Polanski's skill as a director, even with all the controversy around him. Because when it comes to Holocaust films, this one's right near the top. Adrian Brody plays a classical pianist in Warsaw who survives the war by sheer grit and a little luck. Polanski doesn't go in for cheap sentiment or melodrama. Even now, over 20 years later, it holds up as one of the most powerful World War II dramas ever made. Polanski himself is a Holocaust survivor. As a child, his father actually pushed him through the barbed wire of a camp to save him. That lived experience is all over the movie. Fuqua said Brody was incredible in the role and that Polanski handled the material with elegance and emotion. It's a film that I have watched several times, and I always see something new in the frame. Now here's one people forget way too often. Eastern Promises came out in 2007, and it's still one of the tightest, meanest crime thrillers of the 2000s. And for Fuqua, it's right up there with the heavy hitters. He put it in the same breath as Heat and Goodfellas. That's not nothing. This was one of those left-turn moments for David Cronenberg. The guy built his whole reputation on body horror in the 80s and 90s, then hits the 2000s and starts doing these stripped-down crime dramas with Viggo Mortensen. Eastern Promises was one of those, and Viggo's unreal in this. Fuqua called him one of the coldest gangsters he's seen in a while. Said the performance was detailed, dangerous, and just straight-up scary. Viggo plays this mysterious Russian driver working for the mob in London. Quiet, stone-faced, all tattoos and dead eyes. The film follows a midwife who gets pulled into the underworld while trying to track down the identity of a teenage girl who dies giving birth. It sounds like your average crime plot, but it creeps up on you. The atmosphere, the tension, the performances, everything just locks in. It's way more memorable than you expect it to be. But like a lot of great films, it got swallowed up at the box office. Budget was $50 million. It made $56.1 million. And once you factor in marketing, that's a straight-up flop. Which is a shame, because this thing should have done way better. And then there's Gladiator. No explanation needed. This thing was a cultural event. Russell Crowe, peak mode, shirtless and swinging swords. The kind of movie where you just sit back with popcorn and let it wash over you. And Fuqua loved it for exactly that reason. He said it reminded him of old-school Hollywood epics, called it a throwback to the David Lean era of giant filmmaking. That's exactly what it is. It came out in 2000 and dominated. It made $465 million worldwide, became the second biggest hit of the year, and won 5 Oscars. Best Picture, Best Actor, the whole deal. It brought back the entire sword and sandals genre, even if studios couldn't make the formula profitable again. None of the copycats worked, but Gladiator hit that perfect moment.